Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters of the Week video. I wanted to thank everyone again for your very nice comments, your very nice views on my last trip here to Las Vegas. If you haven't had a chance, check out the videos. I've posted about maybe 5 or 6 live stream videos, and all of them just showcase great times, great fun that I had there. The last two especially had to show my 2 ghost hunts at 2 different parks, Fox Ridge Park and then Sunset Park, located there in Las Vegas. Plus, it shows a very nice cameo. If you wanted to have a chance to see those videos and see that cameo, then please do so later on. But otherwise, I wanted to also mix in, as a nice thank you to everyone, a cryptid of the week here. This one having to do with a very fascinating creature. When I was reading this information, it instantly made me want to go to this location that this creature is purportedly there, because if you do so, you'll have a chance, considering it's been noted 3 times, you'll have a chance to be able to find it yourself. It's a very curious cryptid in the sense that it basically is almost like a peeping cryptid, a peeping Tom, if you will. It has to do with this. You're looking at it now. It's known as the Kinderhook Blob. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all the information associated with this mysterious creature. So what is this Kinderhook Blob? Well, it's a creature that has been sighted 3 times over the last several decades. Each time, though, there have been very consistent stories to those encounters. For starters, let's go back, in fact, to the very first one that occurred in the 1960s. It happened at a place, a forest, that was there located in Kinderhook, New York, hence the name of the Kinderhook Blob. So the first report comes from 1962, and it involved 2 young boys who happened to be traveling through the woods there in Kinderhook. And when they did so, each one was about maybe 10 years old. One was 10, one was 7, so very young. When they did so, they were walking from point A to point B, in that case from one location back to their home, and as they did so, they heard this. They heard this very high-pitched whistling like noise. Obviously, being there in the forest, not really expecting that, it instantly drew their attention, and so they tried to see where it was coming from. I mean, it was something that shouldn't be there in the forest. It didn't sound like probably like any kind of specific bird, nothing else animal like, and so they tried to find out what it was. And then when they tried that, that's when they saw it. In fact, it basically was watching them the entire time. And here's how he described it, one of the boys at least. He said it was a white object that was peering at me from behind a nearby pine tree. In fact, that's essentially how this Kinderhook Blob looks like. Imagine a blob, an actual blob, like if you were to take like a plastic mold or something and then just splatter it on the ground. That's what it is. That's what it looks like, except it's white, it's larger than usual, probably humanoid size, and most distinctly, it floats. It does not have any known contact with the ground, at least based on later encounters. But sure enough, there it was. This thing was peering right back at them. It was very hard, though, to tell if it was truly peering, only because they saw that it had no eyes. There was nothing there visible in terms of its, in its quotations, face or its face area. But there it was, instantly just interested in them as much as they were on it. Of course, these were young boys, so they were just clearly freaked out, and so they decided to run as fast as they could back to their home, in this case point B. But the good news is this Kinderhook Blob did not seem to follow them. There was not any other like malice associated with it. It just pretty much stayed behind that tree, just peering back at them. Now, cut to a little bit later, and then for about 2 years after that, everything was cool. But cut to about a little bit after, 2 years later, and then that's when a man, someone else, was hiking within that very same wood. He described an encounter also with this Kinderhook Blob. It's unknown, though, if he knew of its existence, because it didn't seem like the boys were telling this afterward to a lot of other people. But there's a good chance that maybe he knew about it beforehand. Like maybe it just grew in terms of its legend. Either way, though, he was hiking through the woods when it looks like in front of him, much to his shock, he also saw, in quotations, a big white blob, in this case, floating toward him. So rather than in the past situation, this thing just peering from behind woods and not really moving, this one, though, this encounter involved this blob actually floating straight towards him. And again, it was not making any contact with the ground. It was just right there, just coming closer to his location. Obviously, this thing knew he was there, and now, of course, this guy knew that the blob was there because it made initial contact with him. Absolutely, the guy was just freaked out. You would be too if you saw something like this. By the way, it's important to note it did not seem like this white blob was ghost-like. Like, in other words, it didn't have a transparent phase to it. It didn't look misty. It didn't look like you would anticipate involving something for ghosts or spirits. Instead, it looked like a solid white blob. Something that was just completely structureless, and yet there it was floating in the air coming towards him. So he freaked out so much that he ran as quick as he could. He jumped over a pond, according to his measurements, 6 feet across. That's the adrenaline that was pumping within him, and then he escaped. But if you can believe this, he decided to actually go back to that very same spot. This time, though, he brought a friend because he wanted to make sure maybe that he wasn't delusional, maybe that he can convince someone else too of this thing's existence. This time, though, he was smart. He was able to bring shovels and pitchforks to try to make sure that if they did see this beast, then they would have something that they could work with in case this thing started to attack them. And lo and behold, it did make its appearance yet again. This time, though, it was his friend that saw it. He described his friend, like he was looking at his friend, he described his friend as suddenly turning white as a sheet. Like I've always wondered if that really is true. Like when someone is so scared of something that the color just drains from them. If anyone has seen that in real life, let me know if that's really true. Either way, he saw it right there on his friend. The look on his face, his whole composure, his color turning white. His friend pointed ahead, and then absolutely there was this thing yet again hovering, in this case, from tree to tree. It was floating from the trees somewhere in the background. Everything they had in terms of confronting this beast and then trying to see if they could do anything to it, maybe even capture it, all of that was suddenly gone. They dropped their shovels, their pitchforks, and they all ran away. Wisely so, because again, this thing so far has not shown any ill intentions, but why risk something if you try to confront it? And then the third encounter, you have to cut to a couple years later. After that, maybe in some cases it happened still within the 60s. Others apparently state that it happened in 1978. So over a decade after the last experience. Either way, though, apparently there were two people there at the time that saw this creature, both of them also young, 14 or so. Barry Scott and then Russell Lee were their names. They were once again traveling within that very same forest, and as they did so, they heard, in this case though, they were actually at a point where they were inside a tent. So they were traveling through the forest, they had a tent set up. In this case though, they heard the distinct signs of tramping, like there was something outside their tent making very specific steps, and that rustling noise, you know, the kind you can imagine in your head whenever you have twigs, you have leaves, foliage, other types of stuff within the forest on the ground. Anything that's stepping on it will make a very distinct sound. You'll know, in other words, that something is there. And so they appeared outside the tent, and that's when they saw this thing one more time. They saw this creature very identical to everyone else's descriptions, a big white floating blob, and it was there around their tent. And then when they did so, one of them is specifically the boy Barry described it now, because it seems like they had a much closer look at it, as being bell-shaped. So probably being larger on one end and then smaller on the other end. One of them, though, was thinking that it was more of the ghost, like it looked more ghost-like than some of the past descriptions, but at least in this case, it definitely matched what everyone else had seen before. I don't know, though, if these boys ran away. Most likely they did at that point, or if they decided to stay within their tent. Either way, the same thing happened. This blob did not interact with them. It probably saw them, but it didn't do anything bad to them, and so they must have either run away or decided to just stay within the tent until it left thereafter. But that's been it. There haven't been any other encounters thereafter with this Kinderhook blob. But if you wanted a chance and you wanted to test out if it's still there, just go to the forest there in Kinderhook, New York. I don't know if there's like a large amount of forest there, or if it's one specific spot. Anyone that lives near that area, if you have a chance and you know that info, post those comments below in terms of its geographic location of those forests. And then maybe again, if you have an opportunity, if you wanted to test it out, that would be really good. I would love to. Like if I was near that area, now that I read this information and I was able to try to pinpoint where, like let's say the tree was from the very first encounter, or where the second encounter location was, that pond that was 6 foot across, you can then try to go like piece things back together to try to find out where these blobs locations were, because that would be a great starting point to see if this thing is truly there. Arm yourself with a good camera, or maybe something else along the lines of video, whatever's the case, and then maybe you'll have a good opportunity of running into it. But that's it. That's all the info associated with this Kinderhook blob. Anyone else have anything else I might have missed? Maybe something else that stands out? Maybe someone that's already been there to that location or lives in that area and knows more info. Please post those comments below. That'd be really, really great to hear. So, alright everybody, thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.